We're starting our part 2 session of TRESA and explaining TRESA, the processes as we understand it, as we know it, and including some best practices and understanding the policies for a brokerage going forward. I'll start off the meeting. This was an email that came out on December 1st. Share the guide. This is a beautiful resource. Let me start off by going through this. And this is really the first step if you're being introduced to a consumer that is not quite clear on what the definitions are of a client or a self-represented party. You can share the RICO information guide with them, and it goes through actually for you. First step is for you. I want to share the information guide. I would click on share the information guide and enter in my details of myself and then the consumer that I'm going to pass the information guide along to. Once that is received and all of your information or the clients or consumer goes through the guide, they acknowledge it, you do receive an email confirming that they have gone through that. This is a convenient tool that I think we'll all start getting used to using, and I'm sure we'll find QR codes, then insert those into your buyer packages and processes there, and it'll be a great tool and resource. I hope everybody is on high alert, receiving their emails from RICO. I'm sure you're getting your emails with your additional insurance coverage, as I've heard. So that's a good thing that you're getting and reading these emails. And that really just comes down to we are professionals in our business of real estate, and we need to ensure that whatever the policy changes are, we're reviewing those and we're reading those documents. So this is where we last left off last week. And just in reference, in context, we were talking about our buyer representation agreements here. Once you have this buyer representation agreement completed, it is always a good idea to take the next step and add your client to the buyer registry service. It may ultimately help avoid an arbitration, mediation, or hearing on compensation. I can tell you this has been something that, as a manager, if this scenario does happen where you've got a client signed under buyer representation agreement, you put it on the registrar. I reach out to the another brokerage where that your buyer may have actually gone through and purchased with somebody else. We're trying to collect. We're trying to hold accountable. It actually is a very powerful tool. That is not just if you do take that individual to court for damages. It's also a leveraging tool from manager to manager, professional brokerage to another professional brokerage. The cooler heads will prevail, and we can sort this out before it has to escalate. So a valuable tool. And don't forget to try the buyer registry service. Search, you can see if your client may have previously signed an agreement with another salesperson. It's also safe and secure, so you can count on the buyer registry service to protect the information you've entered about your client. So this is a best practice for all of us to do, of course. And as I'm going through these slides, I know I'm reading these slides out, everybody. I want the information to be recorded and received well from you. We are opening this session up at the end of our 2025 slides to Q&A that you may have written down last week and have this week as well too. Okay, so in today's real estate market, the competition for clients can be intense, so the need for professionalism is great. So TRESA 2002, contents of written client agreements, general and regulation. The Act, representation is required. So a brokerage shall not enter into an agreement with a buyer or seller for the purpose of trading real estate if the agreement does not include the provision of representation. So the new brokerage limited services representation agreements, representation provision in all buyer and seller written agreements, use when less than full client services or representation, set out clear details within schedule limited services or representation, content parallels client agreements. So this is a listing agreement, seller limited service representation agreement. again, let's kind of get our mindset back in. Our policy as a brokerage, we are now moving towards designated representation. So this is where you are going to have the boundaries around your relationship with your client, buyer or seller. You will not be sharing any details in contrast to previous when the brokerage was representing. So all individuals could know that information going forward. Designated representation, again, it is a defined boundary between you and your client, their intentions, their financial scenarios, what they're willing to take on the prices of their property, reasons for their purchase or their sale. Those are now confidential between you and that client through designated representation agreement. Okay, so in your listing, whether it be a limited service representation agreement or a full listing agreement there, it will be your name that goes on in this line here. Okay, and then in Schedule A, this frankly this is not limited to just limited services representation agreement. This is referencing all listing agreements. And this is something that I'm getting questions on, whether it be this document, which is the limited services representation agreement. On Schedule A, you are to define what services specifically you as the agent will be providing to your client. This is new. This is a new task and requirement under the legislation. We are to define ourselves specifically what the services are that you are providing, taking on that listing agreement. And I know there's going to be questions about, well, you know, what do I put? How specific do I get? At this point, the legislation is clear. We are to outline what those services are, the depth or length of what, and the details of that. That is something that we are researching from a liability standpoint and just as a clarity standpoint as well. But I would, again, as the previous slide mentioned there, your professionalism is required. And look, it's important to communicate, but it's also important not to overpromise and underdeliver. And that's really, again, another complaint. And why TRESA has rolled out is so many times there has been an overpromise and an under-delivering of services, and not just for the sake of, say, protecting the consumer, your client, but as well for the clarity for both of you. What will be the expectation between the two parties, client and the realtor? You've, I'm sure, all heard that disappointment only comes when the expectations are not met. Well, and sometimes we don't even set expectations. So this is, I think, a reasonable expectation for the legislation to expect, defining what those list of services are. Section 2 there, in consideration of the brokerage listing the property, the seller agrees to pay a listing brokerage of commission of X percentage. This will be, of course, under a limited service for sale by owner. Most postings there. There is a section, of course, to define what those commissions are indeed. And I've kind of already dove into the listing agreement, seller limited services representation agreement. Again, designated representation. Michael Baumler will put his name there, and he will be the designated representative of that individual client. Seller hereby, and the next box down here, seller hereby represents and warrants that the seller is not party to any other listings agreement for the property or agreement to pay commissions to any other real estate brokerage for the sale of the property. And again, getting that initial. And I did mention this on the commission side, and the percentages for that for your total commission, and then for the co-op brokerage and what they are to receive at that point as well too. So TRESA representations, implied representation. So there is a caution. Be careful with the context of dialogue used to provide information to a consumer. When providing even the slightest bit of advice or relying on your skills to determine your opinion, you may find yourself now entering into representation that can be enforceable under the Act. So, for example, providing sold prices to a caller that called you directly for a specific area or home, adductive reasoning, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. So again, just make sure that if information that you're relaying, if that's not something that the individual can receive elsewhere, they're relying on your information, your services, your access of details. So you must be careful in that scenario. So that could be implied representation. So best practice: ask if this consumer is working with a realtor always. If the answer is no, the first step for all consumers is, of course, to send the RICO information guide prior to providing any information and confirm receipt explanations of types of representation. Either they will be a client or they'll be signed under representation agreement, or they will be a self-represented party. And I know, again, I'm sure we'll get into the Q&A in this section. It's going to feel very awkward as we move through and actually start this practice in day-to-day conduct of our business. So Form 209. So this is the seller direction to share a substance of an offer. So we're jumping now into open offers with a client. So again, 209, and I think we're going to show what 209 is. Varied offer detailed sharing. No sharing of personal information, name, SIN number, address. In the case of, I'm assuming that's SOPP. Is that supposed to be SRP? I'm assuming the SRP there. That's a typo.
Oh, sale of purchaser's property.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Sale of purchaser property. So there is no required disclosure. Potential change to the seller direction can happen at any time before, during, and following offer presentation. So this is, again, as we move through the expectations of discussing this with our clients, when they are able to relay the information, some expectations, again, of the scenario, what that can be as an impact is important as well. So this is Form 209. We're going to go through this. So this is so this is the seller, and then to the brokerage and the salesperson, and regarding the property address. So in the event of receiving one or more competing written offers, you are hereby directed to share the following substance of any and all such competing written offers with each and every person who is making one of the offers. So you can, of course, initial off on the price, deposit conditions, closing, and there could be other scenarios as well too. So there's no cherry picking. This was a question that is like, hey, can I choose to deliver? I got 5 offers here, and I've got one really high price, I got one in a separate offer here, a really high deposit, I've got a really great closing date over here, I got really good conditions over here. No, you can't, and you can't present them all as if they're all part of the same offer. So there is no cherry picking to pick the best parts from each of the offers, and making a phantom super offer, which I think that phrase came up last week in a question. We can chat about that. So you're not allowed to do that. And so this new Form 209 is required for any time the seller provides new direction. If, for example, it's business as usual, an offer presentation, whereby there is business as usual, and then at one point that seller says, hey, I want to actually share the highest price, you have to stop your negotiation that's happening right now, and you need to make sure that this is efficiently communicated to all parties that are involved. So the seller clients: inform your sellers of the implications. This is, of course, a best practice, but inform them of the implications of sharing offer information. And some buyers may not want to participate. They may want to pull it all together, and that is a risk your seller is going to have to understand at that point in time, right? It's a very emotional period. People act and react differently throughout that. Kind of best practice here, guys, seller clients, make sure your sellers are informed of the implications when you're sharing information. Some buyers may want to pull out. Again, very emotional time. And there is a risk if you're sharing people's details of how they react to that, right? We can control what we can control and our choices. We can't control other people's choices. So clauses in the offer by the buyer to nullify the offer. This is something that's going to be available, and I think it very reasonably. If you share any of my details of my offer, say it's the best price, and you share that with other individuals, my offer is null and void as a condition there, which is, there may be questions around that, but I call that almost acting as an irrevocable does. And when you go past a certain point of time, the irrevocable says, okay, that's now null and void. Same thing, if this information is now disclosed, my offer is null and void. So that's how I kind of compare that in my head anyways. Again, the duties of disclosures and transfer of information. You are to, if there are disclosures, of course, make sure we're doing that in transfer of those details. Sometimes the highest bidder doesn't want their offer information disclosed, of course. For buyer clients, this could be a roller coaster for them. Inform them the seller can make the decision at any point to share parts of the offer or as little or as much as they want. So again, whether you're representing a buyer or you're representing a seller, people have to be now informed. Again, Shazad was saying earlier, oh, there's, some people are saying there's not many changes here. Just on this one section here is massive changes here. And of course, a lot of communication is required to not only ensure that you're having a successful outcome, but again, emotionally and your client's getting upset with you, and as if there's something you can control there, you can't. The buyers are given choices through TRESA that they weren't given before, as well as the sellers. With this great freedom comes great responsibilities and impact to the process. So revised form 652. So this is brokerage communication. So this is an ask between brokerages, no required disclosure, potential change. Therefore, members should follow up or extend inquiry, proper documented communication, email, broker bay to ensure all parties receive all the relevant information being shared. And it makes sense for us to look at form 652. So this is the brokerage communication. That there are competing offers, multiple representation agreements relating to commission remuneration. Tough word on a Monday morning. So this form is intended to be used for communication between brokerages and not for obtaining consent between the parties. So this is, from Millennium to ABC brokerage and the salesperson regarding the property only completed the notification sections that are applicable, of course. So as of this date and this time, here are my comments. In accordance with the provisions of the Trust Real Estate Act, the brokerage shall disclose the existence of the number of competing written offers to every salesperson who is making one of the competing offers, but not to the substance of any offers. Seller has directed the brokerage or designated representative to disclose the substance of part of thereof any competing written offers in accordance with the provisions of the Real Estate Act. Notifications of multiple representation, cooperating brokerages, multiple buyers. These details, and I know it sounds like I'm reading them word for word, which I am, but I think this brings great calm to each of you. You must, what are the forms? And oh my gosh, there's lots of changes. Please read these forms. And if you are going into that offer or that presentation prior to, calm yourself and go through and read it. And if, of course, you have questions on that, your manager is here to elaborate with you. So I'm just going to go back to my slide here. So this is not a new form. Each co-op brokerage with an offer would need to get one. Ensure you document clear and concise communication. This form is not mandatory. So you can continue using Broker Bay. This is an acceptable way to communicate, as we've always been doing right now. Hey, there are 5 offers. Hey, now there are 6 offers. Broker Bay has been really good in sending out those communications, as well as tracking that indeed in one source that it was always done. Email sent is as well an acceptable method as it previously is. Do not convey this communication over the phone. You can, but it's not a good practice. And you actually, what's the point? You want, if it's not written, if it is written, so shall it be done. So it must be in written format. This is the responsible way to protect yourselves and your clients. You need to maintain well-documented forms of delivery. So the accountability through all this paperwork, if you thought we were lax, or you will relax yourself on your forms and your paperwork, boy, that's a really big, significant change in the world of real estate. The completion of forms and ensuring what's mandatory is being completed, and what is just nice to have. Okay, it's still nice to have, but this is not a mandatory format for us as a brokerage. But of course, making sure you've got that documentation somewhere, whether it be through Broker Bay, etc., to show that. So again, best practices: just continue using Broker Bay. This is a good method. Email sent is also an acceptable method, as previously done. So multiple representation, we are required to provide a written disclosure that explains what multiple representation is. Until this information is disclosed in writing to all clients in the transaction, and they all agree in writing, the brokerage or designated representative cannot take any further steps on behalf of any clients. And we were hearing Grace and Greg have clients that they're going to be a multiple representation. Grace doing the responsible thing and making sure that she's first of all communicated that you are in multiple representations for tomorrow evening in her offers. But also she is to receive that in writing, not just the verbal, but to receive that confirmation that they are good to move ahead. So that disclosure is required in writing. And here is that multiple representation acknowledgement consent. So again, it is for multiple representation. So the first section there, multiple representation, the buyer hereby acknowledges that the brokerage may be entering into seller representation agreements with sellers who may be interested in selling a property that is of interest to the buyer, in the event that the brokerage has entered into the buyer's written consent to represent both. I think I just skipped a line there. It's really hard for me to read in this format, guys, but I would encourage you each to read through the details. However, I will read these points here. The buyer further understands and acknowledges that the brokerage shall not disclose that the buyer may or will pay more than the listed price unless otherwise instructed in writing by the buyer. That the seller may or will accept then the offered price unless otherwise instructed by the buyer. So it's just, again, setting the expectations, what this actually means. Whichever scenario makes sense for your buyers, you'll initial there. Again, multiple representation, and limited services. If it is a for sale by owner, and I've got a buyer that is interested in that for sale by owner property, and I maybe got a limited service listing agreement with that for sale by owner, that will be the initial that I'll put there. And then the last one there, multiple representation and designated representation. Let's be really clear. So I'll read this first. The buyer understands and acknowledges that the brokerage represents both the buyer and the seller in multiple representation, as the designated representative represents more than one client in the same trade. In the event of multiple representation and designated representation, the brokerage duty is to disclose to both the buyer and the seller client is a more particularly set out in the agreement with respective buyer and seller. So again, if I am in the scenario where I've got both the client and the seller, I've listed the house and I've got the client as the buyer, I'm in multiple representation if I am that agent there. So that would be that last initial box there. And so this is the acknowledgement that this is happening, and you're providing to your clients there. One, of course, for the seller, and one, of course, for the buyer. I think that's pretty simple, but we'll see in the Q&A if there's any questions around that. The RICO Information Guide encourages alternatives to multiple representation and advises consumers to ask to be referred to another designated representative. You can refuse multiple representation. So if you don't agree the brokerage or your designated representative is not allowed to proceed, ask the brokerage or the real estate agent about alternatives to multiple representation. So this is, I assume, right from the guide. For example, if you are a buyer, the brokerage could refer you to another brokerage or another designated representative to help you make an offer on that property. Again, TRESA is all about options for your consumers. So they're feeling protected, and they're receiving that level of service they expect. Some people believe that multiple representation can give them a better deal or reduce their brokerage fees they have to pay. Agreeing to multiple representation significantly reduces what the brokerage and its agents can do for you, and means they cannot look after your best interests anymore, which can lead to consequences and costs. Best practice suggestion here: have a referral relationship in place with another agent in the brokerage for when you may need it. Again, RICO's primary intention was to avoid this conflict that takes place and arises when there is multiple representation. One of the discussions with the lawyers was, of course, confirming that RICO's intent was, if they can get rid of multiple representation in Ontario, they would do that. RIA has claimed success by keeping that, but working with RICO in order to get this language fully disclosed to your clients, your consumers, for their again, clear understanding. Understand the pros and the cons, and they're really laying out all the details in this guide. Liability now falls on the shoulders of the consumer, client SRP, as well as the agent, and the brokerage, of course, continues. Written disclosure requirements, acknowledgements, and consent. So TRESA requires disclosures on cooperation and representation, multiple representation, material and latent defects, conflicts of interest, the existence of a seller property information statement, SPIS. TRESA regulations also require clear and concise language. We'll tap into that a little later. Prominent use of the word disclosure must obtain a written acknowledgement from the client indicating that the disclosure has been received. Once the written acknowledgement is signed, a copy will then need to be provided to that client. And Christina has done a link here in this presentation. I will remind everybody, we did send out this presentation in a PDF format last week with all live links there. I'm going to send out another link, which does even better. We have a folder on our Google Drive, not just this presentation, but a heck of a lot of other resources, details, guides, etc., that are all found on there. That is the Century 21 Drive, Google Drive. We've got that housed on. A wonderful organization, Christina, that you've done there. I did pause on that reference, clear and concise language. This is it. We are to be clear. We are not to be vague. We are not to be mischievous with our trickery of words. The definitions and the words throughout that guide are so precise. And again, I think it's important for all of us to read that document really clearly over and over and over again. I've already read through it a few times now. I've even explained it a couple times now to people. This is going to be a craft and a skill you will need to develop as an individual. And where do we start here, guys? We start by reading the documentation, the guide. If you haven't read it already, this is first step number one. Print it off, read it, or read it on your computer. But this is where, right at the beginning, if all expectations are not set properly right at the beginning, the entire process can be in jeopardy there. So,
Trevor,
yes,
you've got, if you could just pop back to that slide where you said, you know, there is the link to the bulletins. If you wouldn't mind just clicking that,
yeah.
because they actually, for the, you know, one of the things that I liked about looking at the new bulletins that they've come out with as of December 1st, there was always so much confusion around latent, patent, defects, stigmatized properties. And now you see the RICO bulletins on those are written very, very clearly. One of the biggest ones is around stigmatized property in case of death. Now we are, before, remember when you heard me talking about what are we responsible to disclose? That's a huge change. If there was a death, murder, whatever, yeah, these bulletins. I mean, guys, these are here for your knowledge. You should be reading every bulletin the registrar sends out, especially now with the changes in TRESA. But now, we, before, you know, the client seller was held to common law, what was expected of them in common law. Now, and we were always held to a higher bar. We had to disclose anything we knew, like if there had been a murder, we were supposed to have disclosed it. But now they are saying the seller consults a lawyer, and that I don't know if there's the one there on stigma.
I don't see it here, Joanne, but I know
Anyway,
you were reading from it the other day when we were talking.
yeah, but when you do read it now, you will notice that also the salesperson is only held to the standard of common law, not TRESA. They actually put that in writing. That's huge, because we were always expected more of us, and the liability was on us so much more than on the clients. So I was really
Here's the
happy to see
stigma. I've
that.
got the stigma
There
here.
it is. Yeah, yeah. And I know there's a lot to read there, but it's in there somewhere. Anyway, just so that you know, now your guideline is the law versus a higher standard than was expected of the consumer.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Yeah, just forgive me. I feel like I've lost my way here. 1 second. Yeah, I think this is where I was. Okay. Yeah, but that was a great segue. These resources are not just here for you guys and for your understanding when, again, getting into answering questions for your clients. This will be a wonderful resource for you, rather than, of course, you have to explain it, but it is a resource to send them as well too. The standards of professionalism in the business of real estate are going through the roof, and that professionalism comes with liability and expectations and responsibilities to informing your clients. In many ways, I know this is frustrating that we're going through this change, but I think this is overall, I don't think anybody would disagree. This sort of clarity is not valuable for a consumer, especially when they are spending, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 plus on commissions to our realtors. I think this is a wonderful attempt of really bringing value to the agents that are doing the right thing. So a great link there. Again, Christina, thanks for putting this together for us in this regard. Written disclosure requirements, acknowledgements, and consents. So 22.2 there, if a seller has a legal obligation to disclose a fact to the buyer and the fact is known to the broker or the salesperson who represents the seller, the broker or salesperson shall disclose the fact to every buyer who expresses an interest in the real estate. So again, the listing agent is to get an acknowledgement signed by the buyer confirming that they have the disclosure, and then the buyer is to receive a copy of their acknowledgement as well. Just clear communication, making sure full disclosure is taking place. RICO bulletins on disclosures, acknowledgements. Again, Joanne was saying there on material facts, stigmas, in fact, a seller has as a legal obligations to disclose. And again, that first point, not just there as it's referencing in RICO, in the guide itself, it describes the obligations and expectations from our clients now when you are representing as far as your communication, abiding by the law. So that previously wasn't, the expectations on clients working with us was not as clear as it is today working through that guide. And then of course being acknowledged by that client. Working with the realtor, forms 812 and 810, best practices. So 812, it's a 2-page format. It is recommended. Form 810 has been updated, still 1 page, has lots of information in small print, of course. So the 2-pager is recommended. Brochure version has been removed. That's form 811. Will still be used along with the RICO information guide when the need arises. Acknowledgement section provided for receipt of the information guide. Member and consumer familiarity in the beginning. Excellent trade file summary, including acknowledgements, content extended to includes self-represented parties, designated representation, and multiple representations. So this is all required. This is the 2-pager working with the realtor. So it's a little bit different. So the buyer or the seller acknowledges having received, been explained the information guide. So that has to be initialed. So you've given them the guide. Okay, I want to be a client. Yes, I want to be a client. And boom, here's what it is to be working with a client. I've already received the guide and it has been explained. So you are required to explain that. Don't just give it to them. Not good enough. You got to explain it to them. And again, if they are a self-represented party, I'm not going to read the entire paragraph there, but then that buyer or client, the buyer or seller acknowledges having received and been explained the self-represented party acknowledgement form, then they would need to initial there. Highlighted here, multiple representation will not result if the brokerage designates a broker or salesperson under the designated representation agreement to represent a client unless that designated representative represents more than one client in the same trade. So then it'll be disclosed at that point. And of course, the last section on the guide, if there's ever a problem with from a client standpoint or a consumer standpoint, how they can place a complaint and communicate there. So there is a discipline committee scope and authority under TRESA here. We'll just kind of review that. So the disciplinary committee will now have the ability to suspend, revoke, or apply conditions to a registration, investigates realtors' conduct, and refer the matter to the discipline committee, whether a formal complaint is made or not. This could be through social media, etc. This is big change. This is huge change. You no longer have to get a complaint. Of course, when you receive a complaint, you know who is complaining from you at this point. They don't need to receive that complaint. If they're seeing stuff for a variety of reasons, or they're just doing random spot checks, that could happen. The composition of the discipline committee will consist of 5 or more members, and at least one of those members must have no connection to the real estate industry. Any appeals of RICO discipline committee decisions will be to the License Appeal Tribunal, an independent quasi-judicial tribunal. RICO appeals committee is no longer, excuse me, the resulting discipline, including the reason for the revocation or suspension of the registration, will be made available to the public. Fines up to $50,000 for the individuals and $100,000 for the brokerages.
Trevor, there's one thing I forgot to put there. They've always published the end result for discipline. One thing I forgot to add is they will publish from the onset that they open a complaint. So whether it's been proven or not, your name will go on a list with what they've alleged you've done. So that'll be published on the RICO site as well, and that can sit there for as long as it takes them to get through that particular complaint.
Yep.
They didn't used to do that before, only once there was a decision rendered, but now they're putting it as soon as they suspect something.
And they are so far behind. We actually have one. Ironically, it's against a stellar realtor, happens to be sitting on the discipline committee. And it's been 2 years and he still doesn't have a ruling. So in future, that would, on the old rules, it's not sitting publicly while waiting for judgment. But in the new rules, it can actually sit there for up to 2 years. So if someone's, doing thorough research on you, that's going to be sitting there. So this is all very serious, and it's quite a change for RICO to be able to make a complaint themselves. Sorry, Trevor.
No, two great points. I do refer people to, when you make decisions in your business, whether you had previously operated in business before or just in real estate as a whole. I always refer people, when you lay your head down on the pillow at night, regardless of getting caught on something, are you feeling comfortable, with your conduct in your business? And this is I think, the gut check that we should all have. I think it's important as we're doing our business plans into the new year, whether it be our mindset when working with clients, and let's say, for example, on the very extreme side, you are a real estate agent that found yourself on the CBC News years ago, doing fraudulent paperwork, et cetera, and you were the worst agent out there. That agent should be questioning, based on the standards now and through the enforcement of the discipline committee and what they now powers have, should I be in this business of real estate? And it is that intention that this is created, I believe. I think that's obvious for all of us. But also the nuances and the, I don't want to call it willful ignorance at times, but I do see willful ignorance in the industry of real estate, and letting certain things slide in your business. You're going to question that if you're going to do that or not now. So this is and the one point that gives me concern, and I don't have full answers in scope on it, but we need to be on social media very careful what we're putting out in the market as well. And I'm not talking about, it's not limited to the obvious, ranting by a realtor and disclosing, hey, it's a really great time to purchase real estate, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about just the small items, representation, your brokerages, your details, how you're advertising yourself. Is there confusion there? Those are things in the past I think there were. Nobody's going to really pay attention to it. This opens it up to a lot, frankly, and we'll find out as we go on what they're really interested in trying to capture. I think they're trying to capture, of course, the certain conduct and avoid, the public getting swindled within the transactions and deals, right? So this is my personal thoughts. But how to get the guide out there: be open, be transparent at each opportunity with a consumer. Excuse me. Step one: always send the RICO information guide and thoroughly explain the contents of that. Create the link in your email signature. Great idea that redirects the consumers back to that guide. Email them after you've taken their initial call, chatted with them. Have it ready at your open house, print version, digital download via QR code. As I mentioned earlier, RICO online tool is coming soon, which it is here now. It wasn't when we created this presentation, but that is there now, as I showed it earlier also. So all wonderful. We start right there. We start right there. Services, as I did mention, it is required using a Schedule A to your listing agreement. If you are doing staging, photography, open houses, you would sign up a listing agreement. There will be a Schedule A. What is on that Schedule A? You will be now listing your items that you will be providing. Again, it's making it clear to the consumer, your client, what they are paying for. And that is to be, of course, explained how the commission may change in multiple representation, services, credits, rebates, etc., staging costs credited when sold. There's a variety of different things. Actually, Shazad, last year, I know when we were going through scenarios where there is a lot of investment by the sales agent, whether there's painting be done, there's staging. You know, I've had agents that spend $10,000, $15,000 getting a house ready. If in scenario there's a problem in the contract and it wants to be, they want to be mutual release, the payment of that will be paid out proactively written in that Schedule A. Of course, as I mentioned, early termination and cost recapture of those services. So explanation is required. I'll leave it at that. And this is required through the legislation. And again, now available through RICO, the 2024 updated course, Introduction to TRESA for registrants only. This course focuses exclusively on the TRESA, specifically the changes that impact the day-to-day activities of real estate agents and their interactions with buyers and sellers. Completion of this course will fulfill your 2024 updated course requirements, even when you take it in advance. I'm halfway through it right now myself. It's great. It's wonderful. The more information you get, understanding this thoroughly, the more powerful you will be when speaking with your clients. The worst thing you want to be when talking to a new consumer is showing, you know, that you are unsure of yourself, unsure of these definitions. This will be the skill that we are all working on over the coming months. Explaining the communication. This is a skill set. This is something that we are required as professionals, and I look forward to it, raising that bar. Okay. Q&A. We're going to open it up for Q&A right now. Stop sharing that. Thanks for listening, by the way, to that presentation. But I know there's a lot of questions, great questions out there we had last week. How do we want to start this? We're going to raise hands. Yeah, Neil. Okay, let's start with raising hands first, and then I'll look over in the chat because I'm sure there were some questions over in the chat. We'll get through this. Neil, why don't you start us off, brother?
On December 1st, you sent out a quick tips and resources sheet to us. It mentions Form 200 on it. Are you saying now that you want us to use Form 230 instead of 200?
Form 200 is the listing agreement, the standard listing agreement. The one that was used in this example for the limited services was the example that tied into the SRP that was just before that. So Form 200 is still your go-to for your listing agreement. And I think the Schedule A to that might be 203 or 223. I can't remember.
Yeah, 203. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. I've had a couple agents ask, for things that are currently listed, do they need to do an amendment for anything that's already listed, or is that good until it expires or they do a relist? So like a Schedule A to the listing agreement, do they need to do an amendment to add one at this point stating everything that's been done, or is it just anything new?
So as I understand it, at this point, all current client agreements are still valid and standing. I think since we have decided to go designated representation, the question that we have is, are we going to do an amendment to that designated representative?
Yeah, that is the first notable amendment would be send out an amendment to have it recognized that you are their designated representative. I'll tell you, my like listening to the registrar's video was probably more comforting than I expected it to be. In his own words, he did say, yes, everything starts on December 1st, but we understand what a big learning curve this is going to be for you all. So the tolerance level will be high initially. So your contracts that you currently have are solid. If you want to start your best practices, the first amendment I would do would be send out the amendment and designate yourself, identify yourself as their designated representative. That just starts to clean up your paperwork. It makes it stronger and more current. So that would be the one that I believe you should start with, that First Amendment. Now I sound like I'm out of America. The First Amendment is get yourself on the paperwork so that you are the designated rep.
Could you give us an example of how to work that, please? Like, how do I use and when do I use that form?
So which form, let's pull it up. Which form, the
209. I think
It's
209. The
209.
open offers form?
Yes, sorry, open offers.
So, I mean, the first question is, do your clients understand open bidding, and do they want to do that?
So
that
when do we have that conversation? At the listing? When we list the home, we show
Yeah.
them, have the conversation, and when
Yeah.
do they sign the form?
As I think when you're sitting down, you're doing your listing presentation, maybe you're doing the paperwork as you today are currently getting your seller's direction. If and when there is a multiple offers in that scenario, it would be reasonable to do it at the same time there. And of course, letting them know they can make that decision today, and you can make that decision, at the moment of offer presentation. And here are the pros of doing it in that scenario, as we had that slide up there saying, like, hey, you could upset some of those buyers, and that could be a risk to them as well too, or it can enhance the return that you're of course getting out of that. So I think the earlier the better on the communication, but that one's a little bit unique because at any point in time they can say, hey, I want to do the open house, or I want to do the open bidding now. When you do the open bidding, at the last hour in that moment, of course, everything has to stop with communication, with the offer presentation, and that needs to be formal. That formal paperwork needs to be completed, and then that communication needs to be sent out to all participating buyers at that point, which will consume time and potentially throw the spirit of an exciting
Trevor,
presentation.
if you can find that form, I'll gab while you find that to pull up. Again, when you have to talk to when you're on a listing presentation, you've got to talk about multiple representation. That's when you would be disclosing, and having discussion around that. And then to bring up, now, if we get multiple representation, there'll be some questions that you'll have to be facing. Do you want us to start saying what the highest price is? If you want those things disclosed, we have to stop the process. Here, there will be paperwork that I explain to you at that time. And but you will have, when we were doing multiple offers, and there's 30 to 40 offers that Trevor was, I know, working for Stefan, for instance, in the boardrooms. This is going to be a huge stop. Get all your paperwork done, decide exactly what the seller wants to disclose from the substance of the offers. And okay, Trevor, you've got the form there, but it's going to be really specific. And there's your items right there. But this is going to be time consuming, without a doubt. It's and this is going to be a really big change in our entire industry to start disclosing the contents of an offer.
Does that answer your question, Grace?
Yes, I'm gonna have, yes, yeah. I had a situation on the weekend where it would not have been an advantage whatsoever to the seller to disclose.
And you wanted to, but okay, so that's more specific. And if as Trevor was explaining, some buyers are going to have a clause in their offer that if the offers become open offers, I'm out, I'm null and void. I don't want to compete. I don't want
Mhm.
any details of my offer disclosed to anyone. I mean, situations for your seller is once, this could drive every offer off the table
Right,
and you're left with no offers anymore.
right.
Never has this been more pertinent than in open offers. So that's going to be our responsibility to explain those scenarios to the sellers before they move forward with this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So step one, Form 209 would be something that you present as your signing paperwork, listing agreement paperwork. And step two, of course, is the communication, if that indeed does rise up, what those details are to the buyers that are participating. There are a couple of hands up, whether it's to this or not. I'm going to go Stefan first. Go ahead, Stefan.
So just going back that, for example, if we had this situation when we were doing all those multiple offers, we could potentially lose some because of depending on when the seller would change their mind at what time, let's say in the evening, that could push some offers off the table just because of, if their offer was only valid until 10 p.m. and this is like 9:30, the seller decides to change everything. That could really screw the seller.
Yeah, look, I think the intention. Yeah, absolutely, and I think everybody who's listening to this kind of process here, Stefan. You got 60 offers. Was it 60 offers we had that night? 60 offers, right? So however many offers, whether it be 60, whether it be 6, whether it be 2 in the multiple offer world, there, we understand the complications, the emotions, the risk. People walking away, getting offended. Yeah, because buyers can get offended. We know that. The purpose is really that we're communicating that this is an option to the buyer or the seller, and this could happen. And what if it does? As a buyer, be prepared, communicate. This is what this could mean. Wow, Stefan, there's just so much to know here as I'm going through this. Yeah, indeed, there is. It's not as simple as just clicking that box and putting it into your cart and you get your Amazon package, your new house in the mail. No, this is a big purchase. It's very serious, and we need to inform you for your protection and for your success of this deal. So what's important is we communicate it. What's important is we explain the risks in that scenario to both buyer and seller, and we follow through on that process. I'm not going to anticipate or say, indeed, this is going to ruin the whole negotiation. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm saying it's a risk of it, and vice versa. It can be an advantage and it can be a risk as well too. Park, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, actually, I have two questions. I'll ask the first one, which is relevant to multiple, which I don't see happening anytime soon. But since we're on that topic, like you said before, the seller can choose to disclose part or full information about the competing offers and the contents. And on the other side, the buyers could possibly put in a clause stating that if any of their offer details are revealed, then they pull out. Their offer is not valid anymore. In an instance where, let's say, there are 60 offers, even 4 offers for that matter, and 2 competing offers are exactly the same, which happens all the time, how would they know that this is not their offer that's being revealed, but the other buyer's offer, which does not have any clause like that? I don't know if I'm clear, but let's say 2 offers are at 600,000. And one is with that clause of pulling out if their offer is revealed, and then the other 600 is not. And then the seller reveals that we have the top offer at 600,000. How would the other offer feel about this? And then the seller can say, we didn't reveal your offer, we just revealed the other offer, but both are identical, right? Then what happens in that situation?
And Trevor, I'd like to answer that one because that's like one of the most common complaints that I deal with for you guys with Rico.
Right? Yeah.
If Rico always had expected a paper trail connected with multiple offers, always. And when they get a complaint, they come in, and any of you who have ever gone through this, no, it's like, I want to see the details. I want to see your emails. I want to see your texts. I want to see everything through Broker Bay. They come in and ask for everything that you can prove that because if buyer 2 who wanted to drop out at 600 and then buyer 1 was at 600, how can he tell it wasn't his that was revealed? Rico will come in and do a full investigation. And if your paperwork is in order, you can say, here is my first offer at 600. This is the one we were doing an open offer on, not yours, Mr. Buyer 2. So if your paperwork is done properly and recorded, it will be fine. But those are the exact scenarios that Rico, one of the reasons that TRESA has come in is because these are the complaints they get from consumers. How do I know
But
that they weren't
potentially
tricking
that
me?
buyer with that clause will lose in that case just because of that clause, right? And they could be innocent, right? I mean, innocent as in like they didn't have to pull out because technically their details were not revealed. But then
Garth,
they're
it'll
out
be
of
up to your experience to let your clients know that they maybe shouldn't choose that option or not. The experience here, the realtor here is going to shine. You're going to guide your client to the best possible price that he can manage. And if you divulge the offer contents, you might lose to. So you're going to recommend that he doesn't divulge.
right. And my second question is
But also on that point, like just again, your example there, you got 2 offers, both at 600,000, and guess what? 600,000 is divulged. That would just mean to that buyer who has that clause in there to state, hey, if you divulge my number, that means I'm going to pull out. Well, that would mean therefore that there is a second offer with the same number, and I didn't actually divulge your number, I divulged their number as well. That's by default. No, if it's true, I did not divulge the contents of your offer, but a different offer. I guess the question is, can you live with that? Can you believe that? And can you believe anything in the process? Well, you must, you should. We're all working as professionals. So therefore, then that would mean that there's another offer of 600, and I have not disclosed your number. I've disclosed their number. So I don't know if that.
right, but with that clause, it's not like it's an option for the buyer to pull out. It's not like he will pull out. You know what I mean? Like it's just going to get so complicated with that clause in, and
It's not an option if it's written in.
the clause. What does the clause read? It says that the buyer have an option. It's not like automatically they get out of the bidding process. I'm not sure of the wording of that clause, but I understand that it's always up to the buyers. Right? I don't know if I have the clause handy. And
Well, I was referring to if my offer was divulged, the offer would be null and void.
so automatically it gets void.
If
Yes, and again,
yes, if it says if you divulge my offer, that the offer would be null and void.
But technically this isn't your offer. So how is that going to be communicated is exactly the question.
well, you can communicate it via email to communicate, hey, this is the number through your form, your disclosure form.
So when we're disclosing as a listing agent, am I talking to each one of those 5, 10, 20, or 60 offers that, hey, you're not disclosing your offer and we're disclosing X agent's offer?
Well, first of all, let's keep it to a number of 5 offers, let's say, and 2 of them are 600, which is the highest number, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the disclosure of that is through the form I just had up there. So there's the disclosure, or through broker bay and communication that is being divulged. The details of that are being divulged in that way. That there's 5 offers, and there's a detail here of what the contents are in there. You can do that through broker bay. So let's say 2 of them are. You're going to call the one that has that condition that Grace just said and say, hey, I know you have this condition. I did not, indeed, as per my standards and the rules here, I did not disclose your information. Therefore, guess what that means? There's another offer that says 600,000, and that's the one I divulged. And it is your option, of course, but that is my client's instruction as well too. Are there complications? Are there assumptions that you can make? You can go ahead and do that. As I'm trying to be as professional as I can, this would assume that there are 2 offers of the same price, not necessarily your offer, Grace, right? So if you're successful in that communication, you have them still on board, right?
So it's
Or you
not
tell
a bad
everybody
clause.
they're real close and you'd like to resubmit.
Yeah, Trevor,
that's not the question, but
Trevor, I posted the AREA clause that they put out in the chat.
yeah.
Also, Trevor, my second question before I forget, is there a list of forms that are mandatory and then the ones that are optional? Like if we can just focus all our energies in understanding and just learning about the mandatory forms first, and then visit the ones that are optional. Like we still don't know if either one is mandatory or optional. So with all these new forms, if we can just get through
There's
for the
not too
list.
many new forms. I think we'll work on a checklist that's pretty much almost the same
Okay.
as it was before. One of your fundamental differences is your Schedule A for your listing agreements. Those would be required. And your 209, that comes up, you can explain it to your clients, but that's not required unless your client uses it. But we'll put a list together. All the packages and web forms and templates have already been set up that have any of the forms that you might need, including the multiple representation forms. We've also thrown the RICO guide in there as a document, just so it's there. But we'll see if we'll put together a checklist on office mandatory forms.
Good. And I appreciate your question there, Parth, on what's mandatory, what's not, but we'll get back to you on that. I see Jim had in the comments.
Oh.
Jim, that was a great point that you can in a scenario that you can. Here are the ones that potentially that I'm disclosing the offers. You can do it in that format. But as well, you don't necessarily have to identify all the other offers. You can just be disclosing the one, the highest offer as well too. But how you've explained that could work as well. And there's a scenario where any other.
Yeah, there's a few more questions, Trevor. There's a couple up there. I don't know who KK is, so I'm sorry. I know you said you don't have a mic. So this is in regards to designated rep on a listing agreement or a buyer rep agreement. They want to know, are they able to put all the names of the designated reps if there's a team? Which name goes on MLS and how is this specified? So Trevor, do you want to answer that or?
Yeah, so now as far as the names that go on the MLS, I can't follow the question all the way through, but I'm going to assume that they can go all on there as far as the number of characters that are allowed there. But indeed, you can on the listing agreement put the individual names that are on that team, or even if they're not on that team, say Parth has a listing and he's got someone that he needs to pull in as a designated rep to support him, whether through a specific time or through the entire time, because that's his backup person, you can do that. Same thing with on a team as well. Now, again, I think it's a limitation of the characters from what I understand through the data on the MLS. Christina, can you confirm that?
Well, yeah, you still only have 2 spots on MLS. You have agent 1 and agent 2. So if you operated in that way where you were the team lead and your team member and you both went on, you're still able to do that. You don't have to put everyone in the listing. One thing you got to just keep in mind that however you choose to operate with your team, whether it's one person as a designated rep or you're going to put all 5 team members, it really just becomes a practice on how you go about your day-to-day business in terms of keeping information confidential. Because if you are on a team and you're a designated rep and your partner is not a designated rep for that listing, you still technically cannot share any information with them. So you have to have,
that's a real issue for teams where they have like buyer agents on their team, and typically the team lead does the listings, so they'd be the designated rep with probably another one of the team members handling listings. But then if they've got 2 on their team that do buyers and are buyer agents, then they wouldn't be designated to the listing. And we've been having conversations with teams. How do they keep, when they're having a team meeting, they got to keep information confidential from their buyer agents on their team. I mean, you know, it's how
and
we
I
should
think-
have been operating, but it's not, it wasn't the common practice of how teams were operating. But now they're bringing, TRESA is bringing clarity to what the expectation is.
And
Which-
somewhere in the RICO course, it gives those best practices of, you know, keeping separate files located in different offices, not really having those open air meetings because you know that everything gets divulged. So those are some things that the teams have to think about in terms of how they keep a separation with their files and you know, office space where certain conversations happen.
I'm just going through the questions as well too.
Yeah.
Kyle asked the question regarding the listing schedule A there. Do we have a template outlining that? Actually got that question twice over the weekend from different agents outside of our brokerage. I got to get back to you on that position on the brokerage providing a list of services. I don't want to dive too deep into it, but Joanne.
Yeah, Trevor, I know, but we get it. I mean, here's just another point, because we did have so much discussion. It's all we talk about. That's all we talk about is TRESA. But again, if we make a template as a company and put it out there, and then we have agents who tend to be like, I don't read all my material. I'll just stick that schedule on there. And you promised them that you were going to have an open house every weekend, but you never had any intention of doing it. If we make a common list, but it doesn't align with the services you're prepared to offer, we get like, that could be a problem for you.
Yep.
So there really is something for you, each individual, to sit down and go, what am I prepared to do when I take a listing?
I think for now that was a lot of information to kind of throw at you this morning. The next stage after this is kind of real life scenarios that you run into over the next week, and we're going to be doing Wisdom Wednesday as late as we can into the new year. I don't know if we'll really stop it, but the last week, of course, we will. But this is a really important time for everybody to keep coming on these calls and having these sorts of questions challenged. We'll keep doing that, but the next session we have, I want to pull up the forms and I want to go through some of these forms in detail, scenarios that again you're running into. So this is going to be ongoing, but here's legislation as we see it today, and we're going to have a lot more sessions on this. This will be months rolling out with questions, guys, I'm sure. And there's 50 people on this call today. We probably have another 150 people that didn't attend that were supposed to be here. So the value, hence, of recording these are going to be there going forward. So, all right, Merry Christmas, everybody, and we'll see you Wednesday and Friday, or next Wednesday on Wisdom Wednesday next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Joanne. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody.